Halloween 2018 is filled with little references and callbacks to the original Halloween and its many sequels. For example, take this scene where a father and son come across the escaped mental patients. Not only do their white outfits seemingly floating around this foggy night resemble the escaped patients from the original Halloween, but listen to the song playing on the radio.
You all right?
This is the same song that we heard Laurie Strode singing as she walked away from the Myers house on that fateful day 40 years ago.
I wish I had you all alone, just the two of us.
The amazing thing is, this isn't even a real song. When speaking at Beyond Fest 2014, actress Jamie Lee Curtis revealed that she just made it up. Which means for Halloween 2018, they actually created the rest of the song and recorded it just to include this Easter egg. I've gone through the entire movie and picked out all of its best secrets. Once again, I will be joined by Halloween expert and horror YouTuber Jimmy Champagne, who will be adding even more Halloween insight and knowledge.
Hey everyone, happy Halloween, I'm glad to be back.
To learn the meaning behind the new opening title sequence, all of the Halloween franchise Easter eggs, my dark theory about Laurie Strode, and so much more. Stick around to the end of this video. Halloween 2018 is not a remake, but this episode of Things You Missed is. I first covered the movie when it was still in theaters, but since then I've noticed many more hidden details that I'm excited to talk about. The Halloween franchise is no stranger to second chances. This movie is the second attempt at making a direct sequel to the original Halloween. The first was Halloween 2 from 1981, which took place the same night as the original. This one acts as if that movie never happened and brings us into the world of Haddonfield 40 years later. Perhaps that's why we see a cop playing Back to the Future pinball before getting the call about Michael Myers, because this movie, like Back to the Future, is all about rewriting the original timeline. The Halloween timeline is like a train map, which I like to call the Halloween Express. I've done other videos exploring alternate routes, but this time we're just going directly from Halloween 1 to the first stop on this line, Halloween 2018. Despite going in a different direction with the plot, there are still similarities and references to all of the other movies. Halloween 2018 is the new Halloween 2 after all. It's not a remake in the sense that it has the same story and characters, it's more of a reimagining. What if Laurie and Michael did not meet for another 40 years? So lots of aspects from the original Halloween 2 and everything else from the last 4 decades do show up in a slightly different form. I'll explain further once we get into the things you missed. The movie opens at the mental hospital Smith's Grove. One of the first images is the pen of Dr. Sartain. This pen ends up being important later on. We focus on it again the next day as he's getting ready for the patient transfer, and it's the same pen that reveals a hidden blade on Halloween night so he can attack the police officer and free Michael Myers. Perhaps this is why there's a little spinal cord ornament on it. He's not literally stabbing Deputy Hawkins in the back, but it is a backstab in the sense that he betrayed his trust. We see more shots around the hospital as Dr. Sartain checks in with one of his patients. It's difficult to hear what's being said, so let me turn up the volume.
Did you have a restful sleep last night? Oh, yeah. I did. In your dreams? No. Sometimes we don't remember our dreams.
He's telling the patient about how we don't always remember our dreams, especially those that aren't recent. If you saw my episode on Halloween 2, you know that movie is all about dreams and what goes on in the subconscious mind. The whole movie is like a nightmare that Laurie can't wake up from. I think the doctor's dialogue is there to tell us that in this continuity, Halloween 2 could be considered nothing more than a weird dream. There's further confirmation later when the character Dave makes this mistake about Laurie Strode's family history.
Wasn't it her brother who cold-blooded mutilated all those teenagers?
No. That's just a bit that some people made up to make him feel better, I think.
So this is a little meta joke to the audience. Allison is clarifying that the Halloween 2 plot twist, where Laurie and Michael are siblings, is not canon to this new timeline. Sartain takes the reporters up to see Michael Myers and asks Aaron, the male reporter, to tie his shoelace, so as not to upset one of the mental patients who has a fixation about untied laces. I see this as another message from the filmmakers to the audience. Don't expect a stereotypical slasher where the victims trip over their shoelaces in life or death situations. This is the era of elevated horror, after all. It's less about outdated tropes and more about disturbing subtext. Whether they delivered on this tied shoes promise is debatable. While it is true that nobody trips on their shoelaces in Halloween 2018, there is a character who gets killed after slipping and falling on a hardwood floor. But the moment is a useful setup because the character with the shoelace fixation, Mr. Tivoli, plays a bigger part in the sequel, Halloween Kills. Aaron brings out the original Michael Myers mask to try to elicit a response, but everyone besides Michael seems to get riled up, which leads us to the opening credits. The classic Halloween title font is back after being absent from everything after Halloween 4. The opening credits introduce Andy Matichak check as Allison, Laurie Strode's teenage granddaughter. It's her first role, just as the world was introduced to Jamie Lee Curtis for the first time with Halloween. This is the first of many examples of Allison filling the shoes of Laurie Strode in this movie. You'll also notice the jack-o'-lantern rotting in reverse. This may sound like the name of a post-hardcore band, but the image represents Michael Myers rising back up to prominence after 40 years. In fact, the design of the jack-o'-lantern is very similar to that of the original movie, which many have suggested looks like Michael in profile holding up a knife. After having no luck with Michael, our British reporters try to get Laurie and her reaction to his impending transfer to a new facility.
He'll be locked away until the end of his days. That's the idea.
This is word for word what Loomis said about his plan to sedate Michael so that he can barely sit up during his trial in the first film.
Barely be able to sit up.
That's the idea.
I know Laurie thinks that Dr. Sartain is the new Loomis, so much so that she outright says so as if she were an audience member watching this movie.
Oh, you're the new Loomis.
But in many ways, Laurie is the new Loomis. Be it her stark belief that Michael is nothing more than evil, her obsession with destroying him, her willingness to pull up and scream at trick-or-treaters who just end up seeing her as a senile old lady, or her resourcefulness to shoot and blow up Michael, there are certainly a lot of parallels. We're introduced to her family shortly after. Her son-in-law, Ray, is setting a mousetrap under the sink. I think this is a foreshadowing of the ending where it's revealed that Laurie's house is one big trap for Michael Myers.
It's not a cage, baby. It's a trap.
Pretty sure it's still a cage though. When Allison and her friends walk to school, the whole scene is an homage to a scene from the original where Laurie walks home with her two high school friends. At one point, Dave stops and blows up a pumpkin with a firecracker.
Go, 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 go! Happy Halloween!
This moment foreshadows the end of the movie, where Laurie drops the same line before releasing the flare into the basement to blow up her masked adversary.
Happy Halloween, Michael.
After Allison tells about her grandmother's history with Michael Myers, her friend Vicky suggests just ignoring the holiday altogether.
How are you guys? I wouldn't celebrate either. I would just put up a Christmas tree instead. Just skip all over the creepy Halloween shit, right?
No, that's a terrible idea. But it might explain why Laurie's daughter, Karen, wears a Christmas sweater for the rest of the movie. I know I don't have to tell this to Halloween fans, but in my last video, I got a lot of questions about what happened to Laurie's daughter, Jamie. This all goes back to the timeline. Because Halloween 4 never happened in this continuity, Jamie was never born, and Laurie has a daughter named Karen instead. The scene inside Allison's class is another homage to a classic Halloween scene. You can pretty much count on almost every scene from here on out to be motivated by sickening amounts of nostalgia. Allison sits in the back left seat, the same position that Laurie sat in 1978. The lesson is about fate, just as Laurie's was. Guess they haven't updated the curriculum lately. They also did this exact same thing in H2O already. The twist in H2O is that Laurie is now the teacher. This time the teacher is played by another familiar voice.
Now let's open our books to Frankel's interpretation. He said, fate took a different course.
Allison's teacher is not seen, but it's actually a vocal cameo from PJ Soles, the actress who played Linda in the first Halloween. Just as her grandmother did years before her, Allison looks out the window, but where Laurie saw Michael Myers standing there ominously, Allison sees Laurie waiting to meet with her. This is part of the main tenet of this movie, the idea that the roles of the hunter and the hunted could be reversed through perseverance. And this is what the British reporters came to Haddonfield to investigate. In his recording, Aaron poses the question, could it be that one monster has created another? Later into Halloween night, Dr. Sartain shares his theory that both Laurie and Michael are vying to become the predator.
Michael's pursuit of Laurie Strode could be what keeps him alive. I would suspect the notion of being a predator or the fear of becoming prey keeps both of them alive.
Now we're seeing Laurie has taken Michael's place as the person standing outside the school, and the movie contains many other examples of the roles being reversed, mostly during the finale. In 1978, Laurie hides in a closet while Michael stalks the house searching for her. But in 2018, Michael is hidden somewhere in the house and Laurie is the one investigating a shuttered closet. In 78, Michael is thrown off the balcony after being shot by Dr. Loomis. He's left lying in the yard, but on closer inspection, he vanishes. But in 2018, the roles are reversed, and Laurie is tossed from the balcony in a scuffle. Michael sees her lying on the ground in a familiar position, but after looking away momentarily, she has disappeared. In 78, Michael's face appears in a dark door frame to scare Laurie, the coolest shot in the movie. But in 2018, after Karen shoots the boogeyman, it is Laurie whose face emerges from the dark to strike fear into Michael. In her spare time, Laurie is shown to practice shooting and essentially turns her house into a fortress. She uses mannequins for target practice, and after completely blowing the head off this one, uses the boobs as bullseyes. There's also a little kid mannequin. Very cool, Laurie, very cool. There's a nice detail after this, which is barely noticeable in the final cut. Laurie has a big scar on her left shoulder from where Michael cut her sleeve open with a knife in the original movie. There is a deleted scene where we get a better look at it. She was not the only one to take on damage that night. When we see Michael at the mental hospital, there's a small scar visible on his neck. This is the same spot where Laurie got him with the knitting needle all those years ago. As long as I'm bringing up deleted scenes, even they have a couple Easter eggs. In one deleted scene, Erin scares Dana with the Michael Myers mask while she's showering, because apparently in some alternate version of this movie, they were a couple. In Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers, there's also a scene where Michael sneaks up on someone in the shower. Another deleted scene shows a dog who became a Michael Myers victim. It's a common Halloween trope for one of the earlier victims to be a dog. It happens in the original, Return of Michael Myers, Revenge of Michael Myers, and Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. Michael and several other patients are being transferred from Smith's Grove to another facility. The idea of the patient transfer comes from Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, where Michael is loaded into a van and the trip has a similar outcome. This time it's a blue school bus, which is a reference to The Purge Season 1, a fellow Blumhouse production. I guess this was just the year of blue buses, because they did the blue Fortnite bus in YouTube Rewind, and Mr. Beast did it too.
Fortnite and Marquez Brownlee.
Is this what you wanted?
This was the first Halloween title to be made by Blumhouse, so they decided to cross-promote with one of their big properties, The Purge. The most recent film at the time was The First Purge, and it features a big Halloween 2018 poster in a character's room. Allison's boyfriend Cameron is played by Dylan Arnold, he's also from The Purge. The two are planning their Halloween costumes as a couple.
So we're going as Bonnie and Clyde.
You know how it ended, right? Their story ended a little
Yes,
bit.
hopefully.
Yes, with the bullets and the bleeding.
That's probably a foreshadowing of the end of this movie. Sure enough, it does end with bullets and bleeding. But they aren't just going as Bonnie and Clyde. Cameron will be rocking a skirt as Bonnie, and Allison, complete with necktie, will be Clyde. It's Bonnie and Clyde, but with the roles reversed. A symbol of the role reversal between Michael and Laurie, where Laurie becomes the hunter and Michael becomes the hunted. To foreshadow this switch, the filmmakers feature the reversal of traditional male and female roles all over Haddonfield. For example, remember that kid and his father who came across the bus crash? They're on the way home from a hunting trip, a typically male-dominated activity, and the kid is complaining about how he's upset that he had to miss his dance class, a typically female activity. There are three main love interests in the movie: Allison's boyfriend Cameron, Vicky's boyfriend Dave, and Karen's husband Ray. They're all kinda sissy boys. Cameron throws his girlfriend's phone in pudding because he can't have her attention. Dave lets his girlfriend go upstairs to investigate a strange noise instead of him, and it leads to her getting killed.
Would you go look?
Do I have to?
And Ray lets his mother-in-law take the lead while he does nothing to protect the family. None of these so-called men take any initiative in their relationship. Dave even puts a special emphasis on the date when he and his girlfriend are gonna lose their virginity and gets a tattoo of it on his shoulder. I don't know why, but to me that just sounds like something that a 15-year-old girl would find romantic. Now, nobody's saying that being a girly boy is a good or bad thing. My only point is that traditional gender stereotypes have existed for millions of years, and these characters ain't it.
I'll pop your cherry.
I do not want to know what that entails. Also, Allison's Clyde costume plays into her becoming the new Laurie. She starts suited up with a blazer, hat, and tie, but as the night goes on, she loses any accessories that might be slowing her down, and in the final shot, she's left with a blue button-up shirt with the top two buttons undone, which leaves her looking a lot like Laurie did when she was Allison's age in 1978. During a dinner to celebrate Allison's academic achievement, there's this kind of bizarre picture of a white horse in the restaurant. The white horse was part of a big metaphor in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. This is either a reference to that, or just they wanted a picture of a horse in the restaurant. Laurie is also depicted in the scene to have kind of a drinking problem, just like her character during the restaurant scene in H2O. Allison's dad also talks about how he used to know Cameron's father, Lonnie Elam. Lonnie is actually a minor character in the original Halloween. He's one of the kids who teases Tommy Doyle about the boogeyman. We see more of him later in Halloween Kills. It is not long after her arrival that Laurie goes into freak-out mode, which leads into a flashback where we see what it was like for Karen growing up, and the house contains a ton of hidden secrets. Laurie shows up late to the dinner, and she's acting a little strange. She's emotional after seeing Michael during the hospital transfer.
I saw him. The Shape.
She calls him The Shape. If you're a Halloween fan, you know that The Shape is Michael's character name in the end credits of Halloween 1, 2, and 6. I believe this is the first time a character refers to him as The Shape in universe though. I kinda like that they acknowledge that somebody actually calls him that without spoiling the mystique. It's still up to the viewer to decide what The Shape really means. They have to send Laurie home, and Karen finally tells her daughter what her childhood was like. There are a ton of cool details in Karen's room. Next to the window, we can see a little bit of this poster frame, the James Ensor painting. You can get a better look at it when we come back to this room at the end of the movie, where we can also see the black globe on the desk and the hat hanging on the wall. All three of these are items that Laurie had in her room as a teenager and held onto over the years. There's another scene later on where Laurie shines a flashlight into the room and we see a heart-shaped pillow, another relic from Laurie's room 40 years ago. Before I move on, there are a couple more points that I want to make about the kid who discovered the crashed patient transport bus. I'm really getting my mileage out of this kid. He's in the movie for like 2 minutes and I already pulled 3 things you missed off of him. After getting out to look for his dad, he re-enters the car where Michael Myers is now waiting for him. Michael chokes him from behind. This is the exact same way that Annie Brackett died in her car in Halloween 1978. As Michael slams the kid against the window, we get a rare glimpse at his face, and you can see his left eye has that clouded over look that you sometimes see with a blind person. This is the eye that Laurie poked out with the coat hanger at the end of the original. It's a little hard to see in this movie, so here's a behind the scenes photo. One of the things I've been keeping track of in each of my Halloween Things You Missed episodes is the location of Haddonfield within the state of Illinois. The original took place around the southern tip near Hardin County, but both sequels, Halloween 2 and Halloween 2018, place Haddonfield in Warren County off to the west. The next day is October 31st, Halloween. It's the best day of the year. Our British reporters have decided to visit the gravesite of Judith Myers, whose headstone has been restored to its rightful place. I noticed this one big recognizable gravestone that says Sinclair, because I remembered looking into this when I analyzed Halloween 1 to see if it was anyone important. It wasn't, but the fact that this is here in 2018 means that they either went back to the exact same spot or created a graveyard set with great attention to detail. Either way, job well done by someone. If anyone is an expert on trees, let me know if it's possible that this skinny tree could have grown into this massive chonker of a tree in the 40 years between these movies. Sorry for calling it that, I got a little carried away. Another similarity between the films is the groundskeepers. In the first one, the guy tells Loomis a story from the nearby town, Russellville. In this one, the groundskeeper talks about her cousin who works in another cemetery in a nearby town. That morning, Deputy Hawkins discovers Michael Myers is one of the escaped mental patients. On the document he's holding, the patient is listed as Michael A. Myers. The middle initial A stands for Audrey, which is a reference that not many viewers know about. The original Halloween was filmed in 1978 and released that same year. It became very popular, so in 1980, NBC bought the rights to air the film on television. It was only 91 minutes, so NBC asked John Carpenter to film a few additional scenes to fit a 2-hour time slot so they could show more commercials. That's where they reveal Michael's middle name, Audrey.
I have no choice but to remand Michael Audrey Myers to the Smiths Grove, Warren County Sanitarium.
Next, we've got another set that pays homage to scenes of Halloween past. The gas station that Aaron and Dana fill up at brings to mind the gas station that Dr. Loomis stops at in Halloween 4. This is where Michael attacks a mechanic to steal his jumpsuit in both movies. If you look closely, Michael is actually the driver of the brown truck that pulls up on the far end of the parking lot. Michael also hijacked a brown car in Halloween. We can actually see him crossing over to go into the service shop while Aaron has his back turned, then again when Dana steps into the store. If you look through this window, Michael can be seen attacking the mechanic in the background. Next to where Aaron is refueling, a red van pulls up from Resurrection Church, and there's a strange woman inside. This may be one of our only references to the 8th Halloween film, Halloween Resurrection from 2002. I also want to note that when Michael Myers stranded Dr. Loomis at the gas station in Halloween 4, it was a strange reverend whose car was decorated with religious stickers who picked him up. Before meeting the reverend, he tried to hitchhike with some cheerleaders in a convertible, but they left him in the dust when he got close. There is a deleted scene from Halloween 2018 that seems to reference this moment, but it's definitely referencing another moment. Listen to what the cheerleaders are chanting. I guess some traditions never die, because this one goes back to the first Halloween.
We're from Haddonfield, couldn't be prouder. Can't hear us now, we'll yell a little louder.
There are so many similarities between these scenes. In both movies, characters start talking about the Halloween dance immediately after walking away from the cheerleaders. The high school sign has been updated, but they're still short on black letters, so they use a few red ones. Details like this are why this movie is considered a requel by fans. It's technically a sequel, but it feels like a remake with how repetitive it is. At the time, I compared it to Star Wars The Force Awakens, which basically does the same thing. It's a requel of the original Star Wars. CZsWorld was a requel of Jurassic Park. All three of these were insanely profitable, so now requels are everywhere. So the homages, callbacks, whatever you want to call them, they just keep coming, like every 45 seconds or so. Dana steps into the ladies' room where she's attacked by Michael Myers. That's a reference to Halloween H2O 20 years later, where that same thing happens. Aaron comes in to save her, but he gets his face bashed into the bathroom wall. That's a reference to the Halloween remake directed by Rob Zombie. I find it somewhat interesting that Michael bashes in the face of this reporter in order to regain his iconic face. Or at least William Shatner's iconic face. Yeah, I've never stopped thinking about this guy on my original videos who said, Michael does not have Shatner's face, it's the other way around. What the hell are you on, man? Suppose Shatner's mom could somehow dictate how her baby's face came out. She would also need time travel, as Shatner was born in the 30s, almost 50 years before Halloween came out. With Michael's costume complete, he's ready to do some trick-or-treating. I hope you're not tired of the constant callbacks to previous Halloween movies, because this next part is something I like to call the Halloween 2 sequence. 3 minutes and 45 seconds of pure nostalgia prawn for Halloween's 1981 sequel. It starts with these two kids. The one on the left is dressed up as a pirate. Halloween 2 had a pirate kid who went to the hospital after getting a razor in his Halloween candy. The kid on the right is a cowboy holding holding a boombox on his shoulder and he bumps into Michael, but Michael ignores him and continues on his way. This exact thing happens in Halloween 2 before Michael makes his way to the hospital. Then Michael goes between these houses to snoop around. You can hear some kids singing in the background. This is actually another Halloween 1 reference. It's the same chant that we hear at the very beginning, right after the opening titles. Then Michael goes into the shed and gets a hammer. The first weapon he acquires at the hospital in Halloween 2 is a hammer. I think the existence of the Halloween 2 sequence goes back to what I said earlier. Because this movie represents the start of a new timeline branch, this is the new Halloween 2 in a sense. In H2, Michael broke into the Elrod's house where Mr. Elrod is watching TV. The TV is also on here in 2018, but the program is the 1982 series Voyagers. This show is about a pair of time travelers who go back to repair errors in world history. In other words, they are altering the timeline, just as David Gordon Green, Danny McBride, and Jeff Bradley are rewriting the timeline of the Halloween franchise by taking out plot points that they consider to be errors, such as Laurie and Michael being related by blood. Halloween 2018, in a way, reminds me of Stephen King's 11/22/63. You can go back and change certain events, but there are still inevitables that are going to happen no matter what, which is why the Halloween 2 sequence continues with even more things you missed. Michael's next victim is Mrs. Elrod, a woman in a pink bathrobe with hair curlers making a ham sandwich. She is an homage to Mrs. Elrod, the woman that Michael steals a kitchen knife from in Halloween 2.
Mrs. Elrod? Mr. Elrod? Are you okay?
We don't see Mr. Elrod in Halloween 2018, but there is a reference to him later on when Allison's friend Oscar is drunk in the Elrod's backyard.
Happy Halloween, Mr. Elrod.
2018's Mrs. Elrod is not as lucky as her H2 counterpart, and after finishing her, Michael continues through the house where we hear a crying baby. But Michael does not bother going after the baby, which may be a nod to the original and the 2007 remake where Michael ignores kids and babies during his spree. Outside, a couple dressed as a doctor and nurse are leaving their house.
Wait, hang on, I don't have my stethoscope.
Halloween 2 takes place at a hospital in Haddonfield, so you can bet there are plenty of scandalous nurses there as well. This is also a setup for Halloween Kills, where these characters would come back in a bigger capacity. But instead of going after them, Michael turns to his right and stares through the window at this woman talking on the phone to someone named Sally.
Hey, Sally, how are you?
Mrs. Elrod's neighbor in Halloween 2 is also on the phone with a girl named Sally.
Sally, I can hear the sirens coming.
Judging by the conversation, this woman is also learning about the latest incident in Haddonfield during this phone call.
Really? That's awful.
And in both movies, Michael sneaks up with a little surprise. And that is the 3 minutes and 45 seconds that I collectively refer to as the Halloween 2 sequence. After that, it's straight back to Halloween 1 memories. No Halloween requel would be complete without at least one babysitter, since the only reason that Laurie and Annie ever encountered Michael Myers was because they were babysitting across the street from each other. This time, Vicky is babysitting a kid named Julian, or as I like to call him, the best character in the movie. Her boyfriend is already on the way to join her for a spicy evening, and Allison and Cameron are supposed to stop by after that. She's setting up a very similar scenario to what went on at the Wallace household in 1978, where Annie invites her boyfriend and Linda and Bob use the house to get busy. However, like in Halloween 1, things don't go according to plan. While Allison and Cameron are attending the Halloween dance, presumably the same dance that Laurie hoped Ben Tramer would take her to, Allison sees Cameron kiss another girl and she storms off, causing him to chase after her. I'm not sure if this is an intentional reference or anything, but it sure is a lot like this scene from Halloween 4, where Rachel Carruthers gets upset after seeing the boy that she's interested in with the sheriff's daughter, who's wearing this cops do it by the book shirt, and basically nothing else. As a result, they break up, so the after party is limited to just Vicky, Dave, and Julian. Oh, and one other guest. Cops are called, and we hear the following communication go out over police radios.
All units, we have reports of a domestic disturbance at 707 Meridian Avenue.
This is another little Easter egg for movie fans. The original Halloween was filmed in and around Pasadena, California, and 707 Meridian Avenue was the address of the Myers house. You can still visit it, and many locations from the movie, like the corner store and the Strode house. Speaking of the Myers house, when I made my initial video on this movie, I assumed that the dollhouse in Karen's room was a replica of the Myers house. Halloween 2018 was still in theaters at the time, so I didn't really have the opportunity to compare it. And it does look kind of similar, but upon closer inspection, it's clearly not. The Myers house doesn't have these dormers, it doesn't have a window above the front door, and the inner layout is not similar at all to what we see from Halloween's opening. It's not the Myers house. But that didn't stop certain websites that like to steal my writing from saying that it is without actually checking for themselves. No surprises there. Interestingly, there's another little light blue house in the background during the interview scene in Laurie's living room. It is also not the Myers house, but it's not identical to the dollhouse either. I think the dollhouse just represents Karen's childhood. Karen always wanted to be a normal kid, but Laurie wanted to train her for combat. At the end of the movie, the dollhouse is lit on fire after Karen uses her training to help defeat Michael. The image represents Karen trading a normal childhood for protection all of these years later. One Halloween film that doesn't often get referenced is Halloween 3: Season of the Witch, because it's the only one that's completely disconnected from the rest of the franchise. The movie is about the mystery of an evil mask-making company known as Silver Shamrock. This scene in Halloween 2018 shows trick-or-treaters wearing the 3 Silver Shamrock masks: skeleton, jack-o'-lantern, and witch. Deputy Hawkins shows up at the house Vicky has been babysitting at, outside of which we see a clothesline covered in hanging white sheets. You'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who doesn't use a machine to dry their clothes in 2018, so I see this as a slight nod to the original, where Michael Myers stalks Laurie from behind a clothesline. When I covered the original Halloween on Things You Missed, I talked about how this is part of a psychosexual metaphor, but in just about every episode since then, I've pointed out more examples of hanging sheets. It's pretty much become a Halloween tradition at this point to have them show up somewhere in the movie. Another use of white sheets, both in the original Halloween and this movie, is the bedsheet ghost costume. This time, instead of using it as a disguise, it's used as a red herring. Michael drapes it over Vicky's corpse for Deputy Hawkins to discover. Vicky is also set up in a chair next to a fish tank. It's like when the nurse discovers what Michael did to Dr. Mixter in Halloween 2. Next, Hawkins goes downstairs to find Dave, who is pinned to the wall with a knife, the same fate that Bob Sims suffered in Halloween. If all of these repeated scenes and homages weren't enough, there are also numerical references to other Halloween movies. The cop car that shows up for reinforcements is number 1078. The babysitter murders took place in October of 1978. Deputy Hawkins' vehicle is 1098. That would be the month that Halloween H2O took place, October 1998. And yes, that means this movie is technically Halloween H4O 40 years later. Can't wait for H6 though. Laurie shows up to warn Karen and Ray that they aren't safe, and they leave a message for Allison.
There is a police officer waiting at your house to bring you to us. We're all gonna be together. Now do as I say.
She used these same words 40 years prior to protect Tommy Doyle and Lindsay Wallace.
I want you to tell them to call the police and tell them to send them over here. Now do you understand me? Go do as I say.
Part of the reason this Halloween was such a big event in the horror world was that horror movies were at near peak popularity at the time. This was only a year after It and 2 years after Lights Out and many other bangers. In fact, it seems the writers of this new Halloween were very inspired by Lights Out, as the scene with Oscar and the motion censored light features Michael at a standstill when the light is on, but he creeps up closer to his target each time the light goes off. This is exactly how the antagonist Diana gets you in Lights Out. This wasn't the first or last movie to borrow this concept, but whether this imitation was a form of flattery or theft is ultimately up to you to decide. But I think it's theft. I was amused to see that Halloween takes another page from Lights Out later in the movie. The mannequin scene where Laurie is looking around for Michael in the house is very reminiscent of the factory scene at the beginning of the feature film version of Lights Out. After seeing Oscar get the virgin suicides treatment on the Elrod's fence, Allison runs, screams for help, and begs for a neighbor to let her inside, the same reaction that teenage Laurie had to seeing her dead friends. The difference is that Allison actually gets someone to let her inside. Maybe we can chalk this up to the existence of technology in the 10s that would have allowed the neighbors to know that Michael was on the loose, and Allison probably wasn't pranking them. The final act of this movie would contain more info about the true intentions of Dr. Sartain, and I have my own theory about a dark secret from none other than Laurie Strode. After picking up Allison, Deputy Hawkins heads towards Laurie's fortress of a house to get her to safety when he comes across Michael Myers. He decides to floor it and try to run Michael over, the same tactic that Rachel used at the end of Halloween 4. This is where we get the first big twist of the movie, where Dr. Sartain attacks him to prevent him from injuring Michael any further. We were led to believe that Dr. Sartain was the new Dr. Loomis, but in fact, he may be the new Dr. Wynn, the cult leader from Halloween 5 and 6 who essentially acts as Michael's handler. Looking back, there are a few clues about Dr. Sartain's true allegiance. I already mentioned the significance of the pen, but before the patient transfer, Sartain almost seems to be trying to comfort Michael.
Don't worry, Michael. I'll be by your side.
It's already well established that Michael is a sociopath, so there's no reason to do this. It's evidence that Sartain has grown attached to his patient. He even fights to be on the bus, most likely a sign that he had something to do with helping the Shape make his escape.
Michael Myers is still my patient until he's in somebody else's care. So I'm seeing my duty through till the end.
And finally, when Hawkins suggests that he's going to kill Michael if he gets the chance, Sartain tries to convince him otherwise, even though it's clear that they'd be risking the safety of the townspeople.
Remember, he's property of the state. He mustn't be harmed.
Sartain's motive is an interesting case. He's a psychologist that probably needs his own psychologist. He's become so obsessed with understanding Michael that he sees value in putting on the mask and seeing what it's like to kill.
So, this is what it feels like.
The fact that he puts on the mask himself seems to pay tribute to the original producer's cut of Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers, where Dr. Loomis discovers Dr. Wynn left behind with the iconic mask at the end of the movie. Dr. Sartain's care for his patient is not mutual, however, and he gets his head stomped in, a fate that he shares with the trash guy from Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. All of this seems to suggest that Dr. Sartain is the one who sabotaged the patient transfer that allowed Michael to get free. It's obvious, based on his motives, that he must have had something to do with it. But I find it curious that we never actually see the bus crash that started all of this. My theory is that Laurie played a hand in it as well. We know that she went there with the gun to see the patient transfer, and it's safe to say that she's mentally unstable. At one point, she even admits that she wanted to see Michael escape.
Do you know that I pray every night that he would escape?
The fact that this part of the night is so deliberately not shown in the edit makes me think Laurie may have cut off the bus with her car, causing it to crash in a roadside ditch. Then, Dr. Sartain took the opportunity to use his penknife and fight off the security guards or the driver. As a result, the confrontation doesn't go the way that Laurie had planned, and she shows up at Allison's dinner emotionally distraught. There is a moment where Laurie sees news about the crash on television the next day. WCZD, nice. Many people took this as proof that she didn't do it, but if you actually look at this scene, she has almost no reaction. She doesn't even turn to look at the TV, which suggests to me that she already knew what happened. Going back to the scene where we see her scream, who is this figure approaching the car? Could this be after she's already driven the bus off the road and now she doesn't know what to do? In my initial video, I did see a few comments saying that test screenings did actually show Laurie as the one who caused the bus crash, but since that footage didn't make the Blu-ray deleted scenes, we'll probably never know for sure. Later on, there's a scene away from the action where two cops get into this weird conversation about banh mi sandwiches. The only reason this conversation seems to be in the movie is to make these cops look kind of goofy. I think it's supposed to be a parallel to Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, where these two cop characters are always accompanied by this goofy circus music. It's pretty bizarre. The cops are killed in the squad car while stationed outside of Laurie's house, similar to how the Halloween 5 cops are killed while stationed outside the teen Halloween party at the farm, which is also bizarre. I'm gonna throw it over to Jimmy, who has a few things you might have missed, including who this police officer character really is.
The cop who brings his own brownies is played by Christopher Nelson, and he's done makeup effects work on everything from Avengers Infinity War all the way down to these new Halloween movies. He also created the masks you see in Halloween 2018 and in Halloween Kills, even the flashback mask, which I think looks really good. The ending of Halloween 2018 was not always the ending that we have today. This point is about where this version and the original version of the film diverge. The outcome in both versions of the movie is pretty much exactly the same, but instead of shooting Michael in the face from the top of the basement stairs, Karen actually shoots him on the front porch with a crossbow, and after he takes a pretty savage beating from both her and Laurie, he stumbles off into the woods and sits on a stump. Now, I haven't actually seen the full version of the original ending, but if you look back to the trailers for Halloween 2018, they used a lot of the footage, so you can kind of stitch it together yourself. And from what I've heard, both Laurie and Michael are in really rough shape in this cut of the movie, to the point where it's basically implied that both of them die. But of course, when Blumhouse and Universal saw how good the movie was turning out, they decided to alter the ending a little bit to leave it more open for potential sequels. And then it made $250 million, the story continues on, we get Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends.
Ultimately, they did reshoot so that the final confrontation could go down inside the house. So to set this up, Laurie covers the front door in order to try to give her daughter time to hide in the basement when this happens. The way that Michael reaches through the front door for her is an amped up version of him smashing his hands through the shuttered closet and reaching for Laurie in Halloween. After shooting her way free, Laurie and Karen take cover in the basement, where Laurie has kept this old gun labeled KS for Karen Strode. Michael would soon arrive.
Hey, Vsauce. Michael here.
Wrong Michael. It's kind of weird how they didn't really think Laurie's house through. The basement is located under the kitchen, and at one point she shoots up through the floorboards at Michael, but when we actually see the kitchen from the top side, it's not floorboards, it's tile. As I mentioned before, the roles are reversed, and Laurie is now the hunter. This room is identical to the master bedroom where Laurie and Michael fought at the end of Halloween, but instead of Michael coming in to find the balcony door open, it's Laurie. She follows in Michael's footsteps by going to the closet, but rather than finding Michael, she discovers her son-in-law, Ray. His corpse is stowed in the same position that she found her friend Linda in 1978. Michael emerges from the dark to attack her, and she disarms him by jamming her thumbs into his eyes. In the original Halloween 2, she was able to blind him by shooting him directly in the eyes, and in the 2007 remake, Michael blinds Dr. Loomis by forcing his thumbs through his doctor's eyes. After Karen's childhood gun training pays off in a big way, Michael is knocked into the basement by Laurie. When he sits up, it's in the same fashion as his recharge after being stabbed by Laurie in the Doyle's bedroom way back when. That's what's crazy about Halloween 2018. In their quest to find more and more classic moments to include, they end up including little mannerisms that nobody ever paid much mind to. Like the way Allison puts her hands over her ears after hearing a gunshot, being a trait that she inherited from her grandmother. In the beginning of this video, I discussed how Halloween 2018 is kind of a second attempt at making Halloween 2, and I think the ending solidifies that. Because both movies end with Laurie playing a part in blowing up her evil counterpart, and both of these films could have been the end of the franchise, with Michael presumably burning to death, but neither of them are. I don't know if this was intentional, but when Laurie drops the flare into the basement, I couldn't help being reminded of the sheriff dropping the dynamite down to try to blow Michael up at the beginning of Halloween 5. Allison, Karen, and Laurie are rescued by a pickup truck, which again, I couldn't help but think of our good old Illinois boys from Halloween 4 who pick up Rachel and Jamie. The final shot shows the 3 generations of women huddling in the back of the truck, and Allison has not let go of the knife. My interpretation of this ending is that the evening's events have turned Allison into a fighter. All her life, her family has seen Laurie as this weird, paranoid old woman, but now Allison is going down that path herself. The very, very last thing we experience is the sound of breathing at the end of the credits. It's not just breathing though, it's the sound of breathing against a mask, which we heard shortly after Michael first laid eyes on Laurie in the original. At the time, this was the only proof we needed that Halloween 2018 would have a sequel. Anytime you watch a Halloween movie, you know they're gonna be Easter eggs in honor of John Carpenter, the director of the original Halloween and creator of that iconic soundtrack. Scoring movies was not Carpenter's only musical endeavor. He also had a band, which we see covered in the pub scene in Halloween Kills.
I thought that was gonna be like a holiday pizza party with a bunch of coworkers.
They're singing She Don't Want You Anymore by the Coup de Villes.
Daddy, don't take it hard when you cry. Mama tears you apart when she lies.
This band consists of Carpenter, Nick Castle, who played Michael Myers in the original and parts of the new trilogy, and Tommy Lee Wallace, the production designer of the original and the director of Halloween 3. These mermaid triplets were not the only John Carpenter reference in this talent show.
I think I'll break off with my girlfriend. Her antics are clear, I'll admit. Each time I say, darling, I love you, she tells me that I'm full of shit.
The song is called Shaving Cream, and it was originally aired by a radio host known as Dr. Demento before being released on a compilation album called Dr. Demento's Dementia Royale. In Halloween and Halloween 2, there's a special on TV called Dr. Dementia's Horror Movie Marathon.
I plan on making popcorn and watching Dr. Dementia. 6 straight hours of horror movies. Little Lindsay Wallace won't know what hit her.
To learn how Halloween Kills answered a question that never fully made sense in the original, how Karen shares a connection with her counterpart from another timeline, Easter eggs from deleted scenes, and all of the Halloween franchise references. Evil dies tonight.
Evil dies tonight.
Evil dies tonight!
Evil dies tonight!
All right, evil dies tonight! Not evil dies tonight! Evil dies tonight!
Spoiler alert, he didn't die. Halloween Kills is the direct sequel to Halloween 2018. David Gordon Green would return to direct and co-write the screenplay with Danny McBride and Scott Teems. As the title would imply, this entry would focus more on the kills, but also on returning characters from the original, most of whom get killed. So let's get into the things you missed. The opening shot shows us some balloons. I couldn't help but notice that the colors are the same colors as the Letterboxd logo. Letterboxd is a social media site where you can log all of the movies that you watch, so it's almost as if this is a subtle reminder to log Halloween Kills on Letterboxd. I don't know if this was actually the intention, but if it was, it's a clever way to remind people to give this movie some free advertising on social media. They just might want to do it at the end next time, not the beginning. This shot leads to Cameron discovering Deputy Hawkins where we last left him, injured on the street in the previous movie. I'm surprised Cameron didn't brush this off as a Halloween prank of some kind, but lucky for Hawkins, Cameron is able to get him help. We flash back to Halloween night in 1978, where a group of cops meet up in an alley and Hawkins says that he saw Michael cross through and disappear. Chronologically, the scene takes place right after the original Halloween. On another timeline in Halloween 2, we see an alternate version of the events, where Michael similarly cuts through an alley to escape. As I mentioned in my last video, Lonnie Elam is a character from the original. He's this kid, but here we can also see the Smith's Grove car that Michael stole in Halloween, now parked outside of the Myers house, which means at some point after getting shot by Loomis, he drove the car back to his home. There is another clue that Michael returned home that can be seen when Hawkins and McCabe go to investigate the house and enter Judith's old room. The right window is now closed. In Halloween, we saw Sam Loomis and Sheriff Brackett visit the room earlier that same night, and in that scene, the window was open. Everything else about this set in Kills was carefully matched to the set from Halloween, from the wallpaper to the broken window on the left to the exact lamp on Judith's desk. So this closed window must be a suggestion that Michael came home and closed it. Anyone who noticed this may start to wonder where the boogeyman is hiding. That question would soon be answered when he pops out to attack McCabe, one of the few instances where we see Michael Myers run. And if you look closely, you'll notice he attempts to strangle the officer with a length of rope. This answers a question that fans have always had since the original Halloween. When Michael broke into the hardware store, Sheriff Brackett describes the items that were stolen.
All they took was some Halloween mask, rope, and a couple of knives.
We see Michael wear the mask, we see him use the knives, but until now, we never saw the rope, though you could say that it was used to tie Bob upside down in the closet. That's what I think the purpose of the rope was, but it's cool to at least see a second use for it here in Kills. It was also very clever writing to have Hawkins be the one to kill his partner rather than Michael, because it means that this line from Halloween 2018 is technically still true.
Michael Myers murdered 5 people.
If Michael had killed McCabe, that would have been 6. It would have screwed everything up. You can sit back down now, CinemaSins. The flashback scene ends just as the opening scene from the original movie did, with Michael walking outside and standing in front of his house with a blank expression, where the camera pulls back and he's eventually captured by police. That takes us to the opening title sequence, which features several burning jack-o'-lanterns to represent the fire that Michael was left in at the end of the last movie. There are 12 in all, each progressively more burnt, perhaps because Halloween Kills is number 12 in the franchise. If they really wanted to get metaphorical, they could have made number 8 a pile of poop instead of a jack-o'-lantern. The bar where several of our returning characters convene is an Irish pub known as Mick's, with a horseshoe and shamrock on the sign. This is probably a small nod to the original Halloween timeline, which used Celtic lore to explain Michael's condition. In Halloween 2, the source of Michael's powers is the Gaelic festival of Samhain. In Halloween 3, it is the motivation for Conal Cochran's evil plans, and in Curse of Michael Myers, the dates of Michael's attacks are tied to constellations and ancient festivals of Celtic legend. I go in depth on this lore in each of my Things You Missed episodes on those movies, but for the purposes of Halloween Kills, all you need to know is that Samhain eventually transformed into the holiday that we know today as Halloween, the title of this franchise. As I mentioned in the last episode, this couple, dressed as a nurse and doctor, briefly appeared in Halloween 2018, likely as a reference to the original Halloween 2, which featured Michael taking out Dr. Mixter and his staff of nurses. Their names are Vanessa and Marcus, like in Halloween 2018, can never seem to remember his stethoscope.
Wait, hang on, I don't have my stethoscope. Shit, I forgot my stethoscope.
Just as they were teased in the previous film before becoming actual characters, they tease a character coming up in the next movie, Halloween Ends.
Yeah, no, that's right, you're right. No, stand up for myself. So tomorrow morning, I'm gonna go in there, I'm gonna quit that
punch
job.
Dr. Mathis in the face.
Apparently, Dr. Mathis has been casted and will be a character in this final installment. But there's also a more significant detail about Marcus and Vanessa that you probably didn't think about the first time through. In my Things You Missed episode on Halloween 2018, I talked about how Laurie Strode tried to reverse the roles between herself and Michael Myers to make her the hunter and him the hunted. To symbolize this switch, there are many other role reversals in the movie, like Allison and Cameron's Halloween costumes being a gender-swapped Bonnie and Clyde. We see this trend continue here in Halloween Kills with Marcus and Vanessa. Marcus is dressed as a doctor and Vanessa as a nurse, which are the opposite of their actual jobs.
I'm a doctor, my husband's a nurse.
I should have guessed.
Another pair of characters are swapped in a similar fashion. Big John and Little John are the current residents of the Myers house. At one point, we see them standing side by side, and Little John is a lot taller than Big John. Unless the names are talking about when the two are eventually killed by Michael Myers, they die in the same positions as the framed photograph in the upstairs office, but their places are swapped. Because Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends both began pre-production shortly after Halloween 2018, there's a lot more continuity among the 3 films than we've seen before in this franchise. Being an authority on this franchise, my friend Jimmy Champagne is the perfect person to tell you about some of those details and why some of them are going to be important going forward.
Something that makes this movie feel like more than the sum of its parts to me outside the attention to detail during the flashback is how much continuity there is between Halloween 2018 and Halloween Kills. There are also other setups that are supposed to be significant in Ends. In Mick's bar, we see a poster for the local radio station 94.9 WURG, The Urge with Willie the Kid. Later on, when Mr. Tivoli breaks into Marcus and Vanessa's car, we hear the radio DJ say the same channel name.
WURG 94.9, giving you The Urge with Willie the Kid.
This could tie into the big radio tower we see at various points throughout Haddonfield in Halloween Kills, even the 1978 flashback, which seems to be hinted at possibly being a part of Halloween Ends in the commentary track.
Jesus, what are you up with this radio tower? Is it going to be in the third movie,
Now it's the only
Dave?
thing I'm gonna notice.
I don't know.
And speaking of Mr. Tivoli, we see him during the intro scene of Halloween 2018 before Aaron and Dana meet Michael Myers for the first time. Before the encounter, Dr. Sartain mentions that they should tie their shoes because he has a fixation with laces, and then when we see him in Halloween Kills, there's a quick insert shot where we see that he's wearing Vans slip-ons. And then finally, his umbrella is found in the car. Sticking with Kills, Big John and Little John have a sign tucked away in their office for Big John and Little John Realty. We also see that same sign when Tommy is rounding up locals to hunt down Michael Myers. And then of course there's also a similar ad on the corkboard by their front door. This backstory for the characters works super well because it explains why they would ever want to live in the Myers house. They probably got it for a steal because it was vacant for so long, but I'm just glad we didn't get a cliche line about that in the movie like we would in pretty much any other horror movie, and it's all given to us through context clues with props inside their actual house and throughout the rest of the movie. I also personally like it a lot more than what we got in the original timeline with John Strode moving into the Myers house, where he also seems to be running his own realty business. Or at the very least, he probably got a good deal on the joint from his brother, who is definitely a realtor.
So in a way, Big John and Little John are the spiritual successors to John Strode?
Yeah, they even share the similarity of being victims of Halloween pranks played by trick-or-treaters.
You stinking kids got about 3 seconds to get the hell off my property. 1, 2,
get out of my yard, you little pervert!
I never understood why he calls them perverts. All they did was steal candy. But I do kind of understand why they made a reference to a character from Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. It's because Halloween Kills shares a huge similarity with that movie, in that these are the only 2 Halloween films where Tommy Doyle comes back as an adult. They actually considered bringing back Paul Rudd to play him again, but it seems like it didn't work out, probably for the same reason they didn't want Laurie's daughter to be named Jamie in Halloween 2018. It would just be confusing for casual fans to have strong elements of another timeline like that. So instead, they loaded up the movie with more covert Halloween 6 Easter eggs.
People are afraid. That is the true curse of Michael.
Or, you know, not so covert. Another similarity between the 2 adult Tommies is their weapons. In Kills, Tommy sticks with his trusty baseball bat, despite having access to guns. This reminds me of the end of Curse, where in the theatrical cut, Tommy beats down Michael Myers with a pipe, which he swings around like a baseball bat. I also think the scene where Tommy breaks Old Huckleberry off of its moorings is symbolic. All these legacy characters have waited years and years in Haddonfield, and now they'll finally get to jump into action to fight Michael Myers. However, many of them would suffer a similar fate. This would be the 4th time Nancy Stevens was cast to play Marion Chambers. She was in H2O, Halloween 2, and of course the original, where she was attacked by Michael from the car. He climbs on top of the vehicle and reaches down to grab her. This time, he uses the same tactic by mounting the SUV she's traveling in, punching through that passenger side window, and reaching in to get his hands on her. But this time, Nurse Chambers doesn't make it. Michael stabs Marcus in the eye, like what he did to Dr. Mixter in Halloween 2, then kicks open the car door on Vanessa for his finest and also maybe funniest kill of all time. Lindsay Wallace has her own encounter with Michael shortly after, where she's being choked, but manages to get away by peeling his mask off. She probably picked this up from Laurie, who did just that to escape Michael's grasp in the original. One of the kills earlier in the movie is also a callback. We meet the ex-firefighter Phil Larson and his wife, Sandra, who by the way was the gravekeeper from Halloween 2018. Michael kills Phil by reaching through the door to grab him. We've seen him do this a number of times, most notably through the closet in Halloween and through Laurie's front door in Halloween 2018. While this next one isn't a kill and isn't Michael Myers, there is a callback when Vanessa leaves the bar and rushes to her car. We see the windows are all fogged up, signaling that someone is hiding inside, just like when Michael stakes out inside of Annie's car in Halloween 1978. At the end, Allison falls down the stairs, just like Laurie did in the original. Karen stabs Michael with a pitchfork, just like Michael did to Spitz in Halloween 5. And this guy brings a hockey stick to fight Michael, just like the kid at the beginning of H2O. I guess that's still more reasonable than this lady, who brings an iron to fight Michael Myers. A character so great that fans started calling her the Iron Maiden of Haddonfield.
Hey everybody, this is Melissa Lay and I am the Iron Maiden of Haddonfield.
New Halloween Ends poster just dropped. The mob that the Iron Maiden is seen in is a continuation of the mob from the bar, and if we look more closely, we can discover even more secrets. You know, as far as extras go, the Iron Maiden of Haddonfield gets all the support, but I personally think the guy who realized that moving to Haddonfield was a huge mistake deserves some love as well. He's part of the mob of vigilantes who come out of the bar and into town seeking retribution. In case there's any doubt that this is in part to the same group from the bar, we've got this lady repping the Mix Bar merch. Buy that merch. This group's existence is a reference to Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, where we see a good old group of Illinois boys storm out of the bar to hunt down Michael, but they accidentally kill Ted Hollister instead. What happens here is pretty similar. In Kills, they go after Mr. Tivoli, who jumps out of the window to avoid being massacred by the mob.
God damn.
These new Illinois boys actually spend most of the movie chasing the wrong guy. Between that, the fact that Officer Hawkins accidentally shoots his own partner while aiming for Michael, and this line from Brackett,
"Now he's turning us into monsters."
The idea of hysteria and outrage being just as dangerous as a serial killer is more prevalent here than ever before. This is fitting for a Halloween movie released in the era of cancel culture. People even tried to cancel this movie multiple times. Yeah, these cancel culture people are f***ing deranged losers. Whether it's an intentional message by the writers or just a natural product of trying to portray our society, I find it fitting that Halloween Kills highlights a societal issue relevant to the time period, following in the footsteps of the original Halloween, which I talked about in my Halloween Things You Missed. One thing that can be confusing for some people is the Halloween timeline, or as I sometimes call it, the Halloween Express. All aboard. The current timeline includes Halloween, Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends. It does not include Halloween 2. However, in the pub scene where Tommy introduces Lindsay to the crowd, he mentions how her babysitter Annie was killed. The movie shows us a couple of shots of Annie from Halloween, then, curiously, this shot of her on the stretcher in Halloween 2. While Halloween 2 is still not part of this timeline, it makes sense that this part of the story would have happened anyway en route to Halloween 2018. On a similar note, much of this movie takes place at Haddonfield Memorial Hospital, which shares a similar name and logo as the hospital in Halloween 2. But again, I think we can just assume that this hospital already existed, even if it wasn't shown in the first movie. I know this caused a little bit of confusion for some, but look at it like this. In the original, Laurie had a crush on a boy named Ben Tramer.
I'd rather go with Ben Tramer.
But in Halloween 2, which takes place the same night, Tramer is killed. So Tramer died at about 17 years old in that timeline. However, in Kills, Hawkins tells the story of one night when he was out with Laurie at a bar but didn't get past first base because...
But I knew you were sweet for her. Ben Tramer.
In the US, you have to be at least 21 years old to go to a bar, so this implies that Tramer at least lived to see 21, and may still be alive, which I'm sure Jimmy is very excited about. Now, before I get into the meaning of the ending and some of the deleted scenes, there are a few more Easter eggs that I want to talk about, so let's go back to the beginning. Anytime you watch a Halloween movie, that's not what I meant. That is also not what I meant. I'm taking it back to the apparently controversial firefighter scene. The name on one of the firefighters' helmets reads Gamby. Gamby was a character played by co-writer Danny McBride when he was on the TV series Vice Principals. We can see that the fire trucks have been painted to say City of Haddonfield, but the helmet still says WFD, or Wilmington Fire Department, the unit from Wilmington, North Carolina, where the movie was filmed. CinemaSins, you can stand back up now. That means the gear they use is real firefighting gear, so these E31 helmets are probably just a coincidence, not a reference to Halloween being on October 31st or something. Actually, later at the bar, if you look at this man's phone, you'll see that the time is now 12:07, meaning that we've officially crossed into November 1st. So the final 74 minutes of Halloween Kills doesn't actually take place on Halloween, which is another similarity it shares with Halloween 2, where we see the November sunrise at the end. Then we see another news report on WCZD. Nice. They show photos of some victims from 1978, including Linda and her boyfriend Bob. However, for Bob, they apparently just Googled Bob 1970s high school and found this old yearbook photo of the actor Bob Odenkirk. He is not the one who played Bob in Halloween. That was John Michael Graham. But it kind of looks like him, so they just went with it. I don't know why David Gordon Green thought Googling Bob 1970s high school would work, but it did. Target Halloween decorations, nice. Zombie American Gothic, I've done that meme before, nice. Let's go back to the kids that pulled the prank on Big John and Little John. The girl claims that there was a rusty razor blade in her sister's Halloween candy, which she got at their house. If you've seen my Halloween 2018 episode, you'll recognize that their masks are the silver shamrock masks from Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. However, these are not the same kids that we saw in Halloween 2018. If you look at the skeleton kid's ribcage, it's clearly a different costume. But anyway, the girl claims that there was a rusty razor blade in her sister's Halloween candy, which she got at Big John and Little John's house. Little John is dressed up as a pirate. In Halloween 2, a kid dressed up as a pirate goes to the hospital after biting into a razor blade. During the panic at the hospital, one cop informs the chief that they've called for backup.
Requested backup officers and medical staff from Russellville and Eaton County for support, but no confirmation.
I feel like I've already said this a million times by now, but Russellville is a reference to the line from Halloween 1 where the gravekeeper tells a story that happened in the nearby town of Russellville. Russellville was a city in Kentucky near where John Carpenter went to college. We get another scene with the two Johns later that morning where they hear more noises outside the house.
Next time I'm coming with a pitchfork.
This is foreshadowing. I already mentioned it, but there's a moment towards the end where Karen saves her daughter by absolutely impaling Michael with the pitchfork. Lol. The sound effect used even shows us that it's a real metal pitchfork, not just a plastic Halloween decoration. There's a scene in the dining room where Little John gets spooked by his own reflection, but in front of the mirror there's this guillotine decoration. This is one of those things where it could be just a Halloween decoration, or it could be a little nod to that famous beheading scene from Halloween H2O 20 years later. I do have Jimmy still here. I am requiring him to stay until the end of this video, even though he already said his part. Jimmy, what are your thoughts on this?
Wait, what?
There's also a glimpse into the remodeled upstairs bedroom. This is Judith's old room, and there's a very similar desk with a mirror and lamp in the same corner where Judith was brushing her hair on that fatal evening in 1963. When Little John encounters the shape, he says this:
"Michael, you've come home."
Which seems to be an homage to Loomis's line in the first film.
He came home.
Of course, that wouldn't be the only classic line that came back.
You know, it's Halloween.
Everyone's entitled to one good scare.
I also noticed that the street address of the Myers house is 709 in this movie. This confused me because everybody knows that the Myers lived at 45 Lambkin Lane, right? As it turns out, I'm here to tell you they're wrong. I guess this is kind of one of those Mandela effect moments. After seeing the Myers address was 709 in Halloween Kills, just to be sure, I went back and checked, and to my surprise, 45 Lambkin Lane was actually an invention of the sequel, Halloween 2.
The old Myers out, 45 Lambkin Lane.
If you look back at the original Halloween, it's actually 709. Kinda hard to make it out, but you can clearly see 701 on the neighbor's house, and you can even kind of make out the painted over 709 in 1963. So actually, Halloween Kills got it right, and Halloween 2 got it wrong. Now let's talk about the ending. Allison and Cameron go to the Myers house after Cameron's dad, and Allison discovers the death of Little John and proceeds to take the knife out of him. She doesn't even need a knife, she already has a gun. You don't bring a knife to a gunfight. You bring a clothing iron. Lucky for Allison, she's saved by her mother, after which she comments on the everlasting presence that the boogeyman has branded on their town.
He'll always be here, won't he? Even when we can't see him.
This line serves as a parallel to the words of comfort her mom offers her at the beginning of the movie.
Dad's gone. He'll always be with us, even if we can't see him.
Both of these moments comment on the tendency of strong emotions to have long-lasting power, one with love and the other with fear, and both of them come with Allison wrapped in her mother's arms sitting on the stairs. Afterwards, we see Karen look up into the right bedroom window, Judith's old room, and she sees the 6-year-old version of Michael Myers staring out blankly. This puts her in the same camp as her counterpart from the original timeline, who saw a vision of the young, costumed Michael in a reflection at the drugstore. In an early draft of Halloween 2018, Karen was going to be named Jamie, just like Laurie's daughter in the original timeline, who we meet in Halloween 4. However, they decided not to do that, fearing that it would be too confusing. But the two versions of Laurie's daughter do share the same experience of seeing a strange image of Michael Myers' past. In January of 2022, Halloween Kills was released on physical media along with an extended cut that includes a few lengthened scenes and additional scenes. The 1978 flashback with Lonnie Elam now includes an extra bit of Lonnie walking home and seeing Michael Myers peering out from behind a shrub. This is a reference to the iconic scene in the original where Laurie briefly spots Michael on the way home from school. The ending of the extended cut also brings back elements of the John Carpenter original. After Karen is taken out by Michael, she receives a call on her cell phone. It's Laurie calling from the hospital, and she simply hears the sound of breathing against a plastic mask and knows that it's Michael. She knows this because of the call she received on Halloween night 40 years ago to this day, after her friend Linda was strangled by Michael, and she heard the same sound over the telephone line. In Halloween Ends, we see a Laurie Strode who is trying to find some normalcy in her life. She needs to overcome her past by celebrating Halloween like a normal person, rather than going to war with Michael Myers. To do this, we see her carve a pumpkin, a holiday activity she took part in when we first met her in 1978. Back then, it was her, Tommy, and Lindsay, and this time she's with Allison and Lindsay. Later on, we get a look at the finished product, and it looks just like the one she carved all those years ago. I guess her style hasn't changed much over the last 44 years. We also see this in her attire. In the original film, she had this long brim hat in her room, which she held onto until 2018, where it would have been destroyed in the fire. Ironically, when she burns her pie in Halloween Ends, you can spot a replacement hat near the front door. Another trait from Laurie's past that persevered is the way she twirls her hair when she thinks about her crush. In the original, she did this while discussing the target of her high school affection, Ben Tramer, and now, 44 years later, she reacts similarly when running into Frank Hawkins at the supermarket. Maybe you didn't notice those details when you first watched the movie, so in this video, I'm gonna go over everything you might have missed in Halloween Ends. From tiny details in newspapers to the broader meaning of the entire film. We once again find ourselves at the end of the line here on the Halloween Express. I'm glad to see one of these timelines actually have a definitive ending for once. You could argue that Rob Zombie's timeline was definitive, but Halloween Ends leaves little to the imagination. No matter what you think about this movie, you have to give the filmmaker David Gordon Green and writer Danny McBride credit for finishing what they started. Every good story has a beginning, middle, and end, even when it does include a timeless character like Michael Myers. This story has come to an end, but like every great legend, it can always be reimagined for future generations. While the story may have come to an end, there are still many more things you might have missed to slash our way through. So let's slide into our next one. The opening song of the movie, Midnight Monsters Hop, has lyrics that describe a concert with many classic Halloween monsters, like Dracula, the Invisible Man, Frankenstein, and the Mummy, who started as pop culture icons, like Michael Myers, but are now eternal urban legends. These are classic Universal monsters, and this trilogy of Halloween films was made by Universal's Blumhouse, so it's almost as if Michael Myers is following in their footsteps. The opening titles are done in the same style as the titles from Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, the black sheep of the franchise. This made me realize that there's a pattern. Halloween 2018 was the first Blumhouse Halloween, and it mimics the titles from Halloween 1. Halloween Kills was the second Blumhouse Halloween, and its titles resemble Rick's Halloween 2. Ends is the third of the Blumhouse trilogy, so it took on the style of Halloween 3. The opening scene shows our new character Corey babysitting for this kid named Jeremy. As the parents are about to leave, I noticed the mom holding a small drone. It reminded me of the scene from Halloween Kills where Michael destroys Sandra's drone just before attacking her and her husband. But I don't think this drone is a callback, because shortly after, we see that Jeremy prefers playing with paper airplanes. He has access to the newest technology, but still chooses the old classic. We also see Laurie playing with the paper plane when she confronts Corey later on. It seems symbolic for a movie with two main antagonists, the old classic, Michael Myers, and the newcomer, Corey Cunningham. Corey just ends up modeling himself after Michael, so once again, the original can't be beat.
It's Halloween. We're gonna have a good time tonight.
Thank God he didn't say everyone's entitled to one good scare. Corey and Jeremy end up watching John Carpenter's The Thing, which is a remake of The Thing from Another World, which Laurie and Tommy watched in the original. It's significant that they chose John Carpenter's The Thing because, as you may know, John Carpenter directed the original Halloween, and Halloween Ends honors more of his filmography. In particular, Ends is more of a remake of John Carpenter's 1983 film Christine than it is a Halloween sequel. In Halloween Ends, we follow a character named Corey Cunningham, who is an obvious homage to Christine's main character, Arnie Cunningham. Spoilers for Christine until the end of this chapter. Arnie starts off as kind of a loser until he buys this old car named Christine and decides to fix it up. As he does so, he becomes cooler and starts to stand up for himself against his bullies and his overly strict parents. The car is actually a supernatural entity with the ability to repair herself and go after Arnie's enemies on her own. Owning this car changes his personality and grows his ego, but it goes too far and Arnie becomes a villain, willing to attack those that care about him when they show concern about the evil car. In Halloween Ends, Corey starts as an outcast because of his babysitting accident. Like Arnie, he gets his glasses broken by high school bullies, and his life is dominated by his strict mother, but his luck starts to change when he receives this motorcycle from his stepdad, with the promise that he can fix it up. Corey works at Prevo Auto, which looks like a smaller version of Darnell's Garage where Arnie fixes up Christine. I found it interesting that Prevo Auto was established in 1963, the same year that Michael seemingly became evil and killed his older sister. It's like there's this parallel between Michael and the junkyard, which is appropriate because Corey's motorcycle is not the Christine of this movie. Michael Myers is Christine. Let me explain. Corey is always said to be a good kid who had a bad break. Even the father of the boy that he killed admits that Jeremy's death was an accident, but something else later seemed to send Corey down a dark path. It is true that this happens right after he gets the motorcycle, but it's around the same time that he first encounters Michael Myers. Like Christine, Michael Myers is in a sad state when we first encounter him, and Corey, like Arnie, develops a strange fascination with him. Christine seems to have Arnie under some kind of trance as soon as he lays eyes on her, and Halloween Ends features this moment where Corey and Michael first make eye contact, and something nonverbal seems to be passed between them. Christine seems to regain her power after Arnie spends countless hours fixing her up in the garage, and in Michael's case, he seems to regain power after Corey brings him a new victim. The way Christine puts herself back together even kind of resembles the way that Michael visually regains his mojo after taking a life. In each film, the Cunningham character gains more confidence and swagger after their first encounter with the supernatural. They both ditch their glasses because not wearing glasses instantly makes you more attractive in a movie.
Hey man, no glasses. You're looking good.
Arnie Cunningham starts dating the most coveted girl in the school, and Christine tries to kill her by locking her in the cabin when she starts choking. Corey Cunningham meets and begins to date Allison, who is similarly an enemy of Michael. Arnie stops listening to his mother and stops respecting his parents, and Corey does the same. Finally, Christine is totaled by bullies, so after getting fixed, she goes after them and hunts them down. Each time, we see the bright headlights blasting them before Christine chases them down and kills them. In Halloween, the bullies try to ruin Corey's motorcycle, and he confronts them by targeting them in the bright lights of the tow truck before running them down. It's definitely paying tribute to that iconic Christine shot. In the end, Arnie's best friend and ex-girlfriend battle and defeat Christine in the auto garage, where she's compacted and dumped in the junkyard, but they're unable to save Arnie. While in Halloween Ends, Laurie and Allison also defeat Michael and bring him to the junkyard to be destroyed, but they are unable to save Corey. There's also a cameo in this movie from Diana Prince, who is known in the horror community as the co-host of The Last Drive-In. One of Christine's iconic scenes takes place at a drive-in movie. There was talk earlier this year of Christine getting its own Blumhouse remake, which Stephen King, the author of the novel, was not thrilled about, so I'm hoping Halloween Ends is instead of that. Because I think I prefer this weird amalgamation of two John Carpenter movies to a remake of a movie that still holds up and doesn't really need to be remade. Plus, Stephen King liked it. Seriously, Blumhouse, quit while you're ahead. After meeting Corey, we move on to Laurie, who has a collection of newspapers pinned to her wall which contain a few things you might have missed. One thing Halloween Ends does really well is foreshadowing, which makes it a joy to watch for your second and third viewing. There are many covert clues about Corey's transition to evil and alignment with Michael Myers. In my Michael Myers horror history episode, I talked all about how Michael seems to be stuck in a childlike mindset because of his trauma at 6 years old. Corey seems to have that same mindset, which can be seen in his beverage of choice. In the opening, he's confronted with a choice between chocolate milk and beer, and he goes with chocolate milk. Then again at the gas station, he chooses milk and refuses to buy beer for the kids pressuring him in the parking lot. Beer is obviously an adult beverage. You have to be 21 to drink it in the US, while milk is considered to be beneficial for growing children, but the lactase enzyme responsible for digesting it goes away in most adults. I also noticed that Corey's mom drinks milk with her spaghetti, and she definitely has some weird issues. Another example of foreshadowing can be seen in Corey's actual shadow as he heads up the stairs. It looks like the silhouette of Michael Myers, which we saw before in Halloween 6. As I mentioned, Corey is a mechanic, and we see him in his work uniform early on, which happens to be the same costume that Michael Myers wears. He's also seen using the blowtorch, which he would later weaponize against the leader of the bullies, Terry, in a pretty awesome kill. When Corey and Allison hang out on the rooftop of the radio station, he claims he's not interested in immortality and drops down to the ground, falling on his back. He appears to be hurt, then sits up in the same fashion that Michael always sits up after a recharge period. Corey's death, or at least his apparent death, is also foreshadowed during the dance party scene. He's laying on the dance floor for some reason, and Allison runs her hands along his face and neck. At the end, when Allison comes home to discover Corey's self-inflicted injury, she finds herself in the same position. Outside of hints about Corey, there are also other aspects of the movie that are set up. The recap at the beginning uses a shot from the original Halloween of Laurie attacking Michael with her knitting needle. Most of us have seen the original Halloween, but it's a nice touch to include that for those who haven't because it foreshadows the moment later in Halloween Ends. We even see that she still knits, so it makes more sense when she finds the needle and uses it as a weapon in the final battle. There are many aspects of the final showdown that are set up earlier on, like the scene where Laurie burns her pumpkin pie. This shows us the location of the fire extinguisher, so it's more satisfying when she gets it and uses it in the finale. Similarly, there's a scene where Allison leaves her meal in the microwave for too long and it explodes. Laurie later does this on purpose as a loud noise that can distract Michael. Then, when Laurie tries to warn her granddaughter about Corey, she uses the following words.
I'm not gonna let this happen to you. You have to believe me.
Which are the first words out of Allison's mouth when she comes back to save her grandmother.
I'm not gonna let this happen to you.
And the last thing I'm gonna point out as far as foreshadowing is how they foreshadowed Michael's death. One of the first things that we ever see at the junkyard is that industrial shredder. It's very brief, but it's a nice setup. It's shown again later on, but my favorite might be the butcher at the grocery store.
3 pounds of ground chuck, right here on the top.
Is that a little clue that Michael is eventually going to become ground beef himself? The procession scene right before Michael's body is destroyed is a great way to wrap up the trilogy because it allows us to see many of the characters who made it all the way through, like Sheriff Barker, the graveyard caretaker Sandra Larson, and the snarky kid Julian Morrissey. Each of these characters appeared in all 3 movies and survived till the end. We even see WCZD make one last appearance. Nice. Let's move on to the Easter eggs. Some Halloween fans may remember the Halloween novelization. These books were not canon, but gave fans a little more detail about their favorite Halloween stories, characters, and lore. The novelization of the original Halloween has details about what became of Judith and Michael's parents after losing their kids, where they are given names for the first time, Donald Myers and Edith Myers. These names are referenced in Halloween Ends in an article pinned to Laurie Strode's wall titled 6-Year-Old Kills Teen Sister in Halloween Tragedy. You can see their names from the novelization are now canon. There's also an obituary section revealing the name of Linda's mother, Marilyn Vanderclock. This is also a name taken from the novelization. Then again, you might not want to trust the newspapers. This article, titled "Myers Manhunt Underway," states that Michael had 27 victims in 2018. It's not entirely clear who lived and who died, but if you tally up all of the victims from Halloween 2018 and Halloween Kills, you would get a number somewhere in the 50s. I like to think this article was written before all the bodies had been discovered, but there's no excuse you can make for this next part, where it says that in 1978, Michael killed 5 teenagers, with Laurie Strode being the only sole survivor. This is just not true. Michael killed 3 teenagers that year, and Laurie was one of 4 survivors, alongside Tommy, Lindsay, and Dr. Loomis. There's one more potential error here, where it says that Michael was last seen at 45 Lambkin Lane in Haddonfield. In my Halloween Kills episode, I talked about how the address of the Myers house is 709 Lambkin Lane, with 45 Lambkin Lane being a mistake made in Rick's Halloween 2, which is not part of this timeline. It is possible, though, that there's a neighbor who actually does live at 45 Lambkin Lane who was the last one to spot Michael. Maybe that's what this article is talking about. As long as we're taking a closer look at these articles, let's look at this one. Nightblade Landmark Destroyed. Nightblade was a working title for Halloween 2018 during the early stages of production, and the film was made under the company name Nightblade Holdings LLC. Halloween Kills followed suit, with the company name being Nightblade 2 Holdings, and Ends was made by Nightblade 3 Holdings. But this article was not the only instance of the behind-the-scenes content being in the scenes themselves. This hobo is a cameo by Christopher Nelson, the special effects makeup designer for the Trilogy. You may remember I pointed out his other cameo in Halloween 2018, where he played a police officer. Deborah Hill, who produced on the original 3 Halloween movies, is sadly no longer around to make a cameo appearance, but there is a nurse character named Deb who seems to be a tribute to her. During the production of the original Halloween, she was dating John Carpenter, and the character Deb is secretly dating the man calling the shots at the clinic, Dr. Mathis. Of course, Deb's death is a direct retread of a famous death from the original movie. Throughout Halloween Ends, Laurie can be seen writing a book in order to help her cope with the horrible events that she's endured. This is almost certainly a nod to her fellow final girl, Sidney Prescott, who has a similar coping strategy in Screeform. Yes, that is the correct pronunciation based on the spelling, Screeform. The relationship between Halloween and Scream began in 1996 in the original Scream, where Halloween was shown to guests at a party. In 1998, Halloween H2O showed Scream 2 on a dorm room TV. Then in 2000, Scream 3 has a scene where Sidney's mother says she'll protect her from the boogeyman, which is a name that is interchangeable with Michael Myers in the Halloween franchise. In Screeform, Sidney is introduced as the ultimate Scream Queen beyond Jamie Lee Curtis, the actress who plays Laurie, among a variety of other references. So I believe Laurie's transformation into a self-help author is a reference to the 4th Scream. Her book is titled Stalkers, Saviors, and Samhain. Samhain is the Gaelic festival marking the end of the harvest season in Celtic Ireland, which is a big part of the lore in Halloween 2, 3, and 6. You can watch my episodes on each of those movies if you want to know more, but the appearance here on Laurie's book title is an Easter egg waiting to be noticed by fans of the originals. There's another reference to Celtic folklore in the song that the homeless man sings after Corey is thrown off the overpass. You've got to listen pretty carefully to pick up on it. If you couldn't hear that, he says, "There's a hole in the boat, and it won't stay afloat, Oilifiest in the sea." This song is called Oilifiest Fear Thee. The Oilifiest is a mythological sea serpent creature originating in Irish mythology. The rest of the song may also be significant.
Now my hands to the door, my knees to the floor.
At the end of the movie, Michael's hands are nailed down with knives and his knees are trapped down by the refrigerator, so this line might be connected to that. But there are still a ton more Easter eggs referencing other films in the franchise, and I'm gonna talk about how Halloween Ends has a message about COVID-19 and what the director meant when he said that Haddonfield is gonna be dealing with the pandemic in Halloween Ends. There's a 4-year gap in between the end of Halloween Kills and the main events of Halloween Ends, during which Allison graduates, gets a job, and starts dating a police officer named Doug Mulaney. This character is most likely a descendant of the Mulaney's from the flashback in Halloween Kills.
That's what you get when you f with the Mulaney's.
Looks like their family motto got passed down as well.
Hey! You know, f Doug Mulaney!
I gotta admit, I spent way too long trying to figure out who the Mulaney's were supposed to be in Kills and did not consider that it might be a setup for the next movie. Another connection to Kills can be seen right here in the graffiti, which reads, "Love lives today." The same text seen on the donation box back at Mick's bar, which helped inspire everybody's favorite line from that middle chapter.
Love lives today.
But evil dies tonight.
Next to the Love Lives Today graffiti is just the word Kills, in case we forgot the name of the previous title. And there's also some artwork of Michael Myers, which might be of note because the police procession goes down the same street before Michael's execution at the end. And speaking of the ending, it also has a couple of Halloween Kills references. After pinning Michael to the kitchen island, Laurie shows him his own reflection in the knife, probably to test Deputy Hawkins' theory from the last movie.
Maybe he wasn't looking out. Maybe he was looking in at his reflection, at himself.
And when Michael gets the upper hand, she yells, "Do it," in a way that almost looks like she's encouraging him to kill her. Of course, she's really talking to Allison, who is standing behind Michael and comes in to rescue her. This mirrors the scene in Kills where Allison is at Michael's mercy and yells "do it," but she's really talking to her mother, who is standing at the door with a pitchfork. I find it interesting that in order to stop Michael, Laurie pins him down to the kitchen island, because in Halloween 2018, she had a much more elaborate trap for him under her kitchen island. But the simpler trap ends up being more effective. Halloween 2018 also shares another similar line with ends. At one point, Corey comes over to visit Allison late at night and he's extremely flustered. She tries to calm him down by saying, "Look at me." The same tactic her mother once used to try to calm down Laurie during her panic attack at the Honor Society dinner.
Look at me. Mom, look at me.
Another 2018 connection is visible when Allison pulls up at the restaurant that she's meeting Corey at. The sign out front advertises banh mi sandwiches, the same type of sandwich that the cop stationed outside of Laurie's house was raving about 4 years prior.
No, a banh mi sandwich. Banh mi is essentially just the Vietnamese version of a French baguette.
Outside of the 40-year trilogy, there are still plenty of other Halloween Easter eggs to uncover. I'll start with Halloween Resurrection, and we can work our way backwards. When we first see Michael's new home in the sewers, there's an insert shot of the rats, which brings to mind Michael's lair in Resurrection, where he lived underneath the house and fed on rats for sustenance. In Halloween H2O, there was a tense scene where the character Charlie drops a corkscrew into the garbage disposal, and Michael sneaks up on him as he's reaching in for it, making it seem as if the boogeyman is gonna flip the switch and grind up Charlie's hand. That doesn't end up happening, but when Michael tries to force Laurie's hand into the garbage disposal in Halloween Ends, it's clearly an homage to that scene. There's also a part where Laurie holds on to Michael's hand after trapping him, which reminded me a lot of the ending of H2O, where the masked man is trapped under the van and reaches out to Laurie, where they briefly touch fingertips. This movie also features a radio host getting massacred during a broadcast, which we saw with Barry Sims in Halloween 6, a retaliation from an angry driver of a black convertible that got scratched, which we saw with Mikey in Halloween 5, an adult giving a teenager a loaded rifle and telling him to stay put, which we saw with Sheriff Meeker and Brady in Halloween 4, and a tow truck being stolen for a murderous rampage, as we saw Michael do in Halloween 4. As always, we get a ton of connections to the immortal classic, the 1978 original Halloween. It starts when Laurie is talking to Hawkins in the supermarket, where you can hear the grocery store cover of Don't Fear the Reaper by Blue Oyster Cult.
Thanks.
They must have watched my Chucky Season 1 video where I ranted about how I don't dislike the song, but it's way overused in movies and TV, because they proceeded to put it twice in this movie. It also plays over the end credits. That evening, when Allison and Corey go to the dance party, Corey bumps into this man, played by Nick Castle, the actor under the Michael Myers mask in the original, and also parts of 2018 in Kills. This Easter egg is actually a two-parter because he opens his jacket and asks,
Anything you like?
which is the same line Linda had in the original movie when flashing her tits to her boyfriend.
See anything you like?
Corey goes off on his own, where he's jumped by a gang of bullies and tossed from the overpass. You can see Michael Myers in the background for just a moment before we pan down to see that Corey is alive. Laurie first sees Corey's behavior start to change when she notices him peering out from behind a bush in the front yard. This isn't really a thing you missed because the shot in the original is so iconic, but people will complain if I don't mention it. A better one to bring up would be that night when Laurie comes home to see Allison and Corey heading up to the bedroom through the front window. In the original, it was the young Michael Myers who caught a glimpse of his sister leading her boyfriend upstairs. This is a continuation of the trend that I talked about when covering Halloween 2018 and Halloween Kills, where we are increasingly seeing the roles reversed between Laurie and Michael to where she is becoming the hunter. Another detail I discussed in my 2018 video was Allison's outfit starting to look like the wardrobe that Laurie wore in the original, and we see that again here in the radio tower scene, where she's wearing that very familiar blue button-up and jeans. We also see Laurie wearing pretty much the same thing in the finale. She first knows that Michael is back when she notices the open back door, which probably reminded her of the window that he came through in '78. As she did back then, she hides in a closet where she formulates a plan of attack. The very ending shows an array of still shots all around Laurie's house. It's just like the ending of the original Halloween, but this time with no ominous breathing sounds. I've already brought up a few details that you might have missed from Halloween Ends soundtrack, so here are a couple more. The second song we hear at the dance party is Halloween by Dead Kennedys, whose lyrics mention a character dressed up like a clown for Halloween. Maybe this is a coincidence, but Michael's first costume in the first movie was a clown costume, and there have been many clown costume appearances in other Halloween movies. There are a couple other songs that reflect ideas expressed in the movie, like when Dr. Mathis gets home and puts on the song Tell Me With Your Eyes by Rob Galbraith. Eyes are often depicted in this movie to be indicators of good or evil. Laurie says that she can see Michael in Corey's eyes. Roger, the father of the boy who got killed, also says when he looked into Corey's eyes, he could tell that he was down a dark path. When Corey first meets Michael, they make eye contact and something seems to be passed between them, during which we see a montage that includes a bunch of extreme close-up of Corey and Michael's eyes. Another more overt music choice is Burn It Down by Boy Harsher, which we hear when Corey and Allison are riding on the motorcycle. This is a reference to the conversation they had about their desires to get away from Haddonfield.
After my mom and dad were killed, I just wanted to burn it all to the ground and get away from Haddonfield.
They bring up this phrase a few more times throughout the rest of the runtime whenever they're talking about skipping town, and this motorcycle scene takes place right before Corey finally convinces her to head out with him. But what is the deal with that piano melody that the characters keep playing over and over throughout the film? To answer that, we'll have to look back many years to one legendary composer. We first hear Mr. Allen perform Toccata and Fugue in D minor by Johann Sebastian Bach in the opening sequence on Halloween night.
Roger, Laurie's here.
This music choice makes sense because the song is most commonly associated with the classic vampire film Nosferatu, which, if you watch Things You Missed, you already know is where Michael Myers got his creepy sit-up move from. Remember how I talked about Corey's shadow on the staircase looking like Michael Myers? That also comes from Nosferatu, which helped inspire many films to this day. We hear these iconic notes repeated throughout Halloween Ends, when Allison first enters the abandoned Allen house, when Corey lets Laurie Strode slip away, and non-diegetically when Michael comes across Laurie and her new house. If you were following updates throughout the production of Halloween Ends, you may remember David Gordon Green talking about how the time jump in between Halloween Kills and Ends meant that Halloween Ends would take place during the COVID-19 pandemic. In an October 2021 interview with Uproxx, he stated, not only do they have their immediate world affected by that trauma, having time to process that trauma, and that's a specific and immediate traumatic event in the community of Haddonfield, but then they also had a worldwide pandemic and peculiar politics and another million things that turned their world upside down. This statement made it seem like the movie was actually going to acknowledge COVID-19, and to be fair, it does acknowledge it. Despite the virus breaking out in late 2019, it didn't begin to affect life in the United States until 2020. The opening with Corey and Jeremy took place in October 2019, and then we see a montage of anguish during subsequent Halloweens. As a side note, this montage contains a really dark detail. We see the mother of Oscar Berlucci, one of the victims in 2018, hanging in a devil costume, the same outfit that her son died in, almost as if to suggest that she was overcome with grief and she decided she could not go on. But we also see this crime scene in a Jeep where the coroner and crime scene photographer are both wearing masks, suggesting that this probably happened in October of 2020. But this is the only evidence in the movie that the pandemic began. So what did Gordon Green mean when he said that the people of Haddonfield had their worlds turned upside down by a worldwide pandemic? I don't believe he ever meant that COVID would be at the forefront of the story, but rather, it seems to be a big part of the subtext. Laurie's whole character arc in this movie is about learning to move on from a traumatic event. She had to deal with 50-some people, including her own daughter, getting killed after she tried to warn everybody about the threats that was Michael Myers, and nobody listened. It sounds a lot like the countless healthcare professionals who tried to sound the alarm about COVID-19. Nobody listened, 6.5 million people were killed, and that number is still rising. Throughout my Halloween Things You Missed series, I've talked about how many Halloween films reflect the culture and time period that they were made in. Halloween Ends is no different. There's never been a more impactful event in our lifetimes, and in this movie, Michael Myers serves as a stand-in instigator for the collective grief that we've all been dealing with. In fact, there are many instances where Michael is compared to a virus. There are constant worries about being infected, and his evil is literally referred to as being contagious.
The suffering Michael caused became an infection, passing on to people who never even crossed his path.
It's contagious, right?
The other kind of evil lives inside us, like a sickness or an infection.
We even see characters trying to spin ridiculous narratives, like the idea that Michael was an innocent mental patient that Laurie pushed too far, causing him to snap. By the time of the movie, everybody seems desperate to blame something for the hurts that Michael caused. Did it come from a bat? Was it leaked from a lab? Does it really matter at this point? Laurie is our protagonist, and she's trying to learn to deal with the consequences of Michael Myers. It's all about this self-promise of hers that she's not gonna let fear rule her life anymore. She still has some safety precautions, as one should, but for the first time we see her trying to get back to normal, putting up Halloween decorations, carving pumpkins, and not spending all of her time preparing to fight. She does all of this despite it being generally accepted that Michael is still out there, and at times we see her panic and revert back to the Laurie that we saw in 2018. Her journey in this movie is trying to fully overcome that. That's why I find the ambiguous ending regarding the fate of Corey Cunningham to be kind of interesting. Near the end of the movie, we see that Corey has the ability to recover from would-be fatal injuries like Michael does, and we never see what happens to Corey. There are many scenes that imply that evil is part of a continuous cycle. Even if you find a way to defeat Michael Myers, there is always a new evil on the horizon, whether it's Corey or one of the other deplorable characters in Haddonfield. Right from the get-go, the opening credits this time show us a series of jack-o'-lanterns being born out of other jack-o'-lanterns, representing the cycle of evil being reborn. In one scene, Lindsay does a tarot card reading for Allison.
Oh no, I got the death card.
No, that's not bad on tarot. No, that just means a major phase is ending and a new one is about to begin.
It seems to be talking about Allison starting a new relationship with Corey, but in the grand context of the movie, it's talking about one phase of evil ending with Michael and a new one beginning in Corey. A similar theme is expressed in Laurie's writing.
I'm hopeful with perspective that my experience will help others heal. You have to ask yourself, am I in control or do the elements control me? Life or death, suicide or cherry blossoms?
Cherry blossoms in Japanese culture are the symbolic flower of spring, a time of renewal and the fleeting nature of life. We can literally see the cycle repeating itself in the movie. The old Myers house is demolished, but there just ends up being a new horror house in Haddonfield when the Allen house is abandoned after Jeremy's untimely death. But I think, whether we're talking about COVID or Michael Myers, the end of Laurie's memoir puts it best.
I've said goodbye to my boogeyman, but the truth is evil doesn't die. It changes shape.
And with that, I have analyzed everything you might have missed in the Halloween franchise, except for the Rob Zombie duology, which I skipped over. The playlist on the left is my full collection of episodes on the Halloween franchise, and if you love horror, I cover all kinds of horror here on this channel. Make sure you subscribe to CZsWorld, ring the death bell for all notifications, and I will see you in the next one, assuming we both survive.